decentralization in Zambia, looking at it in terms of its impact on the economy. And maybe just by way of introduction, I'll begin by defining what fiscal decentralization is. And it's actually defined as the process of shifting the responsibilities of revenue collection as well as expenditure execution from central government to subnational levels. So for PMRC, we're asked to look at 5 areas. So we're looking at the adequacy of the policy as well as legal framework governing fiscal decentralization. We'll also be looking at Zambia's proposed model for fiscal decentralization, the interaction between different levels of government, challenges that are faced in the implementation of fiscal decentralization, as well as recommendations going forward. So to begin with the adequacy of the policy as well as legal framework governing fiscal decentralization, I must mention that there are quite a number of legislation that have been put in place with regards to govern this. The first being the Constitution of Zambia, which actually states that local authorities shall undertake through substructures in government, provide adequate resources for performance of functions at sub-national level. Then we also have the National Decentralization Policy, which was actually revised last year, and it actually provides for strategic direction for the implementation of decentralization in Zambia. It also prioritizes community engagements with regards to it being citizen-driven, and also ensuring inclusiveness in the implementation of programs at subnational level. Then we have the Local Government Act number 2 of 2019, which provides for integrated government systems. We have the Public Procurement Act number 8 of 2020, which revises the law relating to procurement so as to ensure transparency as well as accountability with regards to public procurement. We have the National Planning and Budgeting Act, which actually integrates national planning and budgeting process, and it also provides for principles as well as modalities for formulation, approval, as well as implementation of both long and short-term national, provincial, as well as district development plans. Then we have the Public Finance Management Act, the Debt Management Act, and of course there is the Urban and Regional Planning Act. So when it comes to the adequacy of the policy as well as legal framework, as PMRC, we did undertake a study last year, and one of the objectives was actually to look at the adequacy of the policy and legal framework. So the table or the graph that is actually shown there looks at the responses that we got with regards to the adequacy of the policy and legal framework. And what it actually shows is that a large number of the acts governing the fiscal decentralization in Zambia are actually quite adequate. However, we still know to say that there are certain aspects that have to be amended if we were to actually have a comprehensive and effective legal as well as policy framework governing fiscal decentralization. So to begin with, some of the recommendations that came through from the study is that the Debt Management Act should include the provisions for development as well as clarity for standards for local authorities. Then the Public Finance Management Act, which places local authorities' revenue mobilization under control of central government. It actually should be revised in order to ensure that that provision where the borrowing and lending of funds by local authorities is actually authorized by Secretary to Treasury should actually be looked into. Then also for the constituency, also bearing in mind that it's quite thorough in terms of fiscal decentralization. It has some constitutional provisions that have not been fully implemented, such as revenue sources for local authorities, which still remain at the control of central government. So coming to the second aspect of our submission, which is Zambia's proposed model for fiscal decentralization, I must mention that there are various ways of decentralization. There's devolution, there's also deconcentration, but for Zambia, since independence, we've actually been trying to decentralize through devolution. And with this regards, devolution is actually the most favored type of decentralization as it fosters accountability directly to local authorities. Then it also involves the transfer of responsibilities for services to local authorities that elect their own representatives, that raise their own revenue, and also have an independent authority with regards to how they make their investments as well as how they generate their resources. So for devolution, with regards to this, there are 2 types of devolution. There's fiscal devolution as well as technical devolution. Of course, I have mentioned that fiscal devolution actually looks at the process of shifting revenue as well as expenditure assignments from central government to subnational level. And technical decentralization actually looks at the transfer of technical responsibilities from central to sub-national levels. So for devolution, it actually has 4 pillars. The first one is expenditure assignments. So for this, the Constitution actually provides for specific functions to be performed at national, provincial, as well as local levels. And it also prescribes exclusive functions to be performed by local authorities. I beg your pardon, sorry. Then the second aspect, or the second pillar...
Pause and just have some water.
That's the situation is actually getting to be quite breathless, sorry, my apologies.
Okay.
Yes, so for the second pillar, it looks at revenue assignment, which relates to the attachment of revenue sources funded to the revenue resources that are needed to actually fund expenditure functions. Then for these revenue measures, the various ways in which local authorities actually gain the resources from the issue of user fees and charges, there's local taxes and levies, as well as capital borrowing. Then when you come to the third pillar, which is intergovernmental transfers, this is actually the money that is transferred through central government to local authorities. And as it is, government actually uses 3 grants to transfer funds to local authorities, the first being the Local Government Equalization Fund. Then there's also the grant in lieu of rates, as well as matching funds. Then in addition to these grants, government has also been providing for the Constituency Development Fund, which is actually channeled to local authorities for constituencies, so that the ones that actually receive those funds and then channel them to the relevant constituencies. Then when it comes to the borrowing and debt management pillar of fiscal devolution, national and local government borrow for both short-term as well as short-term cash management, as well as to fund long-term capital projects. So when it comes now to the interaction between different levels of government with regards to fiscal decentralization, I must mention that there are 4 administrative levels. There's the national level, provincial level, district level, as well as local government level. Then when it comes to government, there are 2 types of government, which include central government as well as local government. Then the roles, maybe just looking at the roles of which each and every key player plays. With regards to district administration, their role is to undertake the development and review of district development plans as well as budgets. Then Cabinet Office is the one that actually operates at national level and is actually in charge of overseeing and coordinating the public service. Then with regards to the coordination provincial government level, it's actually done by the provincial administration, which is located in each provincial headquarter, and it's headed by the provincial minister. Then of course we do note that in the Constitution of Zambia, it actually provides that there is an established local government system where functions, responsibilities and resources from national government are transferred to local authorities in a coordinated manner. Then we also do note that in as much as there are these levels and interactions, there also exist some challenges with regards to coordinating these different levels of government. For example, some district administration and local authorities actually find it hard to collaborate towards the common cause, as functions and duties to be performed by the bearers of offices are not clearly stated. So that's actually one of the challenges that are there. Then others are actually kept in the dark over the selection, monitoring progress, as well as implementation of community developmental projects. So we're also asked to look at the challenges that are being faced with regards to fiscal decentralization. Then we do note that although there's the Cabinet Circular number 2 of 2023, which provides for timelines for implementation of some activities, there are certain activities that haven't been accomplished by financial resources, as ministries devolving these financial resources have not actually put in place a budget line aimed at funding those resources. For instance, the issues to do with sensitization are not well budgeted for, so that is actually one of the challenges that is there. Then in addition, some budgets for devolving functions still remains under the line ministries, and the transfer of funds will only be actualized once matching resources actually being provided. Then when it comes to the second challenge, it's actually a challenge with regards to the coordination of actors within the decentralization process. There are quite a number of actors which include both state and non-state actors, such as the local government itself, civil society, as well as the private sector. So coordinating these actors and also ensuring their effective collaboration can be quite challenging. especially in times when we are looking at it in terms of complex as well as diverse context. So regardless of the challenges that have actually been there, we do note that there have been some strides that have been made with regards to achieving fiscal decentralization. We have seen the revision of the National Decentralization Policy in 2023, which I earlier mentioned. The government has also made some progress with regards to decentralizing the management of key public services such as education as well as healthcare. Then also in terms of the CDF, we have been seeing an increment with regards to budget allocation from 2022 to 2024. So like I mentioned, to say that decentralization or maybe is something that we've been trying to achieve since independence, and most of the part the technical decentralization had been achieved, but we also fell short with regards to fiscal decentralization. But with these moves that have actually been put in place, we're actually seeing some positive strides with regards to us actually achieving fiscal decentralization. So I'll just conclude by giving some of the recommendations going forward. So as PMRC, we do recommend that government should ensure that functions are devolved, activities like training as well as sensitization of local government stakeholders should be supported and accomplished by financial resources. Then we also call for the establishment of joint committees, development of shared agreements, as well as the provision of regular training and capacity building for people at local government levels. Then there's also a need to strengthen oversight mechanisms such as the Auditor General's Office and the Public Account Committee, and to mandate local authorities to publish regular financial reports as well as other relevant information just to promote accountability. And lastly, we do recommend that there's need to strengthen institutional structures as well as arrangements at local levels to ensure successful implementation of decentralization in Zambia. With this, Chair, I would like to end my submission.
Thank you so much. Witness, I'd like to thank you for your well thought and informative presentation. Now, just on the introduction, you indicated fiscal decentralization in the process of shifting the responsibility of revenue collection. My question is on the revenue collection. What we have noticed as members of parliament is that our local authorities, 90% of their time, even 95 or 98% of their time is on CDF projects. Since this money was raised where it is, at the expense of their core mandate. There is no revenue collection. Even if you did your own research, it is not growing, despite industry is growing, where the resources can be gotten from by our local authorities. How do you wish this situation to be harmonized? Because it seems decentralization has come with a lot of side effects to the local authority, such that the core mandate is not being adhered to. The members of the public are complaining. You hear, look at even what happened in Osaka, which led to cholera. Because now, when you look at, you go to Lusaka City Council, you find all the engineers, everyone is busy on the CDF projects. How do you wish this can be harmonized so that at least their core mandate is not completely forgotten? Because we need the resources for a lot of other services that the local authority needs to provide. So, in terms of harmonization, how do you wish that can be achieved?
Thank you so much, Honorable Silva. Any other interests for Honorable Mungando?
Thank you. I would like you to comment on two issues. One is what my Honorable colleague and the Sinazongo representative has just highlighted. CDF, do you think it is well decentralized, or we still have interference from the central government? Because if we talk of decentralization, it's the bottom-up approach, meaning people should be able to identify their needs and prioritize it. we have a situation where I can safely say almost 60% of the CDF, if not 70 or 80%, is already allocated centrally in terms of figures. It's not the idea of, for example, ward development committees, that we have companies, we have grants, we have loans, we have ambulances, police vehicles, chief's palaces, retainers' motorbikes. Now we're going to National Assembly offices. It's not the idea of the people. It's coming from the central government. How best do you think, as parliamentarians or lawmakers, can we address such challenges? Then the final one is, do we think we have structures in place for local authorities, should we decentralize, to handle technical services? Good example is health. You can imagine if doctors are reporting to the councils, because at the moment, doctors report through the Ministry of Health, which has established technical staff, health directors, permanent secretaries who are doctors, and they understand health delivery systems at all levels. They are experts. But if we move them to the council, where probably it's now that our councils are being capacitated. I'll give an example here. There was a time when a typist became a council secretary for Zambia. A typist, not a secretary, because a secretary is a well-trained person. But someone who was some of them even became directors, sweepers, cleaners became directors of some department. Now, do you think at the moment structures are enough to absorb such technical services? Then finally, how sustainable will that be, considering that most of the revenue, what I would call high-value revenue resources, are not handled by the local authorities? Typical example is that the law requires that road fees should be collected by the councils, but we've not passed the subsidiary legislation to enact that, to enable that. How attainable is it, and what would be your proposal going forward as researchers? I submit to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. So I'll begin by giving some inputs, and my colleagues will also jump on board where maybe I might have left out some certain things. So to begin with regards to the first question that looked at revenue collection, we do note to say that there has actually been a mismatch with regards to revenue collection with various local authorities, given the economic activities that are actually there. Like I had mentioned, to say that revenue is actually collected through various means, there's user fees and taxes. So we actually see that the other authorities that actually perform better with regards to revenue collection as opposed to others. And with the increase in CDF, it has actually brought upon a lot of needs or maybe resources that the council also needs to look into, which has also brought the problem of in terms of how to actually concentrate which areas the council members should actually, local authorities should actually look into. So one of the things that we actually mentioned, I think it also came out within our research, is that before the increase of CDF, we're actually supposed to put in place various structural as well as institutional structures in order to ensure that we actually absorb those resources adequately. And also looking at it in terms of the way that devolution has been done, there's technical devolution that has gone to these local authorities, whereby ministries actually attach members to the local authorities. So at that point, there's also that lack of coordination, looking at it in terms of that aspect. So that's why it's one of the challenges that has actually been there. So we need to actually strengthen the coordination and also the roles that each has to play. So the issues to do with CDF, like I mentioned, they only need to be channeled through local authorities but have to be utilized by their constituencies. So local authorities, it's just the medium of being channeled. So they have to concentrate on other provisions as opposed to only concentrating on CDF. But I think from the recent years with the increase in CDF, we've actually been seeing that there's been an overlap and a mismatch with regards to roles that people actually take on board. And I think some of the issues that have come in place is the revision of the 23 decentralization policy, which also aimed to curb those challenges that have been there, that have actually been earlier alluded to. So maybe with those, because they actually do emphasize the roles of which each, maybe the ward development committees, and it actually doesn't put in place a lot of roles with regards to the local authorities. So if people would actually understand the roles better, also just maybe go through the policy framework. And also I think with regards to the CDF, there's a bill that has actually been tabled. So also that also tries to put in place measures of curbing the mismatch that is actually there. So going forward, we just need to effectively manage the implementation of the decentralization policy as well as the CDF, the enactment of the revised CDF Act. I'm sure maybe some of those will actually be curbed, but I think there's also a call for increased sensitization. So as we are even taking this, we need to sensitize people on their roles, and also to ensure that they do not give up on other aspects, because you know the CDF alone isn't enough to actually cater for the needs. It's just as a supplementary, but the other forms are actually the same. The local government equalization funds, there's the grant renewal as well as the borrowing. So if local authorities can actually follow their mandate as opposed to jumping on board on issues to do with CDF, which actually have to go to various constituencies. Then with regards to the questions that were mentioned, looking at it in terms of the aspect of decentralization, where we still see that there's the aspect of central government still interfering in decentralization. I think that's quite notable. Even in the presentation, we actually looked at the fact to say that the borrowing and lending is actually done at central level. We have to, local authorities actually have to seek authorization from Secretary to Cabinet, which shouldn't be the case. It actually has to be decentralized. And also the issues to do with rights, of course, that's also one of the functions that has to go to local authorities. But also I think the challenges that are there is looking at it in terms of, it's a give and take situation. So if RATSA actually moves the user fees towards the local authorities, they'll also be losing part of the resource mobilization. But that is also something that has to be dealt with at the interaction level, looking at it in terms of central government as well as local authorities. So as it is, when we did ask the local authorities themselves, they actually said that that function is actually being decentralized to them. They're in the process of actually achieving that. We don't know how further they've gone from last year, but it's actually something that would now start sitting with regards to them. But I think it's just an issue to do with also, I fail of the better term, I'll use politics to say there'll be an institution that is also going to lose out in terms of revenue. So I think there's that glitch with regards to resources that are being provided. Then I think the other aspect in our recommendation, we have actually mentioned to say that there's need to strengthen institution as well as structural arrangements, because we do know to say that once these are strengthened, even as we're devolving these functions, we can actually reach a situation where those functions can actually be properly absorbed, or maybe they can be properly managed. Like we said, you have a doctor who's reporting to the council, where people in the council are not quite aware about medical facilities. So there's importance as well to also strengthen those institutional frameworks. But regardless to that, I think government, there are certain offices, in as much as they're trying to decentralize at local authority level, there are also some offices from central government that are still sitting under those local authorities to ensure that such challenges might actually be curbed. So the way it is, we're not fully, there'll be a component of central government interference within the local authorities as well, because we do know to say that the capacity for local authorities to actually take on some of these devolved functions might not be there. So for central government, they'll still be there in order to assist with certain services that might not be at the power of local authorities to actually give delivery to.
I believe much of the information has already been disseminated by my colleague, but just to add, yes, we agree, once the structures are properly put in place, then it could actually help with some of the capacity issues that we are seeing from the local authorities. So one of the issues is transferring staff from central government to local authorities. Then they can actually take on certain responsibilities that could then relieve local authorities to focus on their core mandate, which is part of it being revenue collection.
I have two questions, Witness. Number one is to do with political interference. As PMRC, when you look at CDF, under Act number 11 of 2018, it's well stipulated in terms of how management and development of funds can be utilized at local authority. Now, you mentioned issues to do with the central government, for instance, where permanent secretaries write to the councils, direct them what they should buy using like the CGF. Apparently, we have an issue to do with the motorbikes where the permanent secretary has written to the local authority, or the local authority, that they are mandated to buy motorbikes for the chief lieutenant. But when you go on the ground, you find that these suggestions are not coming from the local people. They are their own challenges that they have submitted through WDCs, meaning that those proposals or suggestions automatically be ignored. My question is, how can we deal with political interference, especially from us as politicians? The second question is on the registration. When you look at this Act number 11 of 2018, do we see gaps so that we can able to share with this committee to say there are issues that needs to be enhanced on this, for instance, piece of registration? I will cite an example of WDCs. In this act, there have been recognized that even yourself, I think on page 2, C bullet, I think the last bullet there, where you said in relation to the administration of the CDA, the act establishes Ward Development Committee which are responsible for preparing projects based on the aspiration of the community. These people are on voluntary kind of arrangement, and on the side of the government, they are saying they are accountable because even the registration has recognized them. Now, how can these people be answerable where they are not even getting even a coin? So my question is, do we have gaps in terms of law itself?
Thank you very much. I think it's actually quite sad to note that there's actually political interference with regard to CDF, which is actually supposed to be done in order to ensure development at local levels. But the way it is with the 2023 revised decentralization policy, it actually emphasizes the roles of ward development committees. So for projects as well, they need to come from the zones, from the zone level, which are tabled through the ward development committees, and then they're actually also taken upon to local authorities as well. But one of the challenges that we've actually seen is that there's lack of sensitization. There are certain people who might not be aware of when zone meetings are done. So you'd actually find that they actually fail to actually propose some of the projects that they would want to see being done. But other than that, there are other platforms in which maybe just to ensure, I think the only way we can actually curb this is through citizen participation, and also using the citizenry to actually monitor and as well as evaluate the project implementation with regards to the CDF funds. That's what we call on citizens to actually take an active approach with regards to CDF utilization, from the conceptualization of projects all the way to the implementation and also to the evaluation, and they can also give feedback with regards to this. And we've also called upon local authorities to actually be quite accountable as well with regards to their resource management. So we're calling for them to actually come up with financial statements which can actually show where the money is actually going to, in order for people to actually debate if it's really the needs that have actually been put on board or not. So that's actually one of the ways in which we can curb political interference, by enhancing citizen participation throughout the whole process of the utilization of CDF funds. So maybe just going forward, I think there's also need for citizens to actually be be empowered to know that they are actually got the power to question the representatives with regards to how those are being utilized. So if they see there's a political actor who's actually trying to interfere with regards to CDF, they can actually bring that on board. They can report such cases, but that's not supposed to be the case. I think even with the revised 2023 decentralization policy, it actually tries to just ensure that that interference isn't being done. Then also with regards to CDF, I think some of the challenges that were highlighted will actually be curbed with should we be able to enact the new revised CDF bill, and I'm sure my colleague will just highlight some of the silent features that the Honourable Member has highlighted and how the new bill will actually curb those.
Yes, we do agree that the WDCs are actually a key pillar in enhancing community participation into decentralization. And one thing that we note is the lack of incentives for these WDCs to actually adequately provide for their duties and responsibilities within the structure. We also think that there should be a structure put in place that would make them more accountable, as well as increase transparency for the roles and the responsibilities that they requested to take up. One of the things that we have noted, for example, in the new proposed bill is the declaration of interest, and we think that this is quite significant in that there's increased community participation, and it's from within the community that some of these projects are supposed to be implemented. And you find that WDCs, in most cases, they are from within the community, and they have vested interest as well in some of the projects that are being undertaken. So we think that the declaration of interest clause could actually help curb some of the issues to do with accountability and transparency. We also think that it would be a good idea to put in place a feedback mechanism in terms of project list priorities. We feel that in most cases, when WDCs relay the needs of the community, they could be lacking in terms of providing feedback to the community to say these particular projects that you proposed were not undertaken because of the ranking in terms of priority. That is one of the ways that we feel could improve on community participation. Otherwise, sometimes they get discouraged from participating in these discussions when they discover that all the things that they are proposing are actually not being prioritized.
Accountable. But we've seen the devolution happening, but then the accountability part of them, is still left. For example, let me just talk about CDF. When CDF is not working, who do we blame? It's a member of parliament. And this question, even if you ask it to a technocrat, if you ask a technocrat to say if CDF is not working in a particular constituency, who is the failure? They'll say it's a member of parliament. If you go to the voters themselves and you ask them, if CDF is not working in a particular constituency, who's the failure? They'll say it's a member of parliament. Actually, when you go to also the authorities, the ones that have the local authorities, the ones that have the mandate, they'll still point a finger at the member of parliament and say the reason why CDF does not work is because of the member of parliament. We've also actually seen the local authority themselves do what do you call them? Absorption, CDF absorption, burn rate. And to that, the person who's died is a member of parliament. I think you've seen those reports. They'll say CDF burn rate is 90%, and then they'll link it to the member of parliament, who does not have so much authority or the power in CDF. So do you think that as we are doing the devolution, the local authorities are willing to take that accountability part?
Thank you very much, Chair, for that question. The local authorities, it's not about them being willing. I think it should be their mandate for them to actually take upon accountability. So they need to be accountable. It's part of the roles that they need to also part of the services that is there. So for the CDF, I'm sure most of the time, I think there's just a misconception with regards to that. That's why we call for more sensitization, because people actually do not understand the roles and what is actually involved with regards to the utilization of CDF. And of course, all those challenges, looking at it in terms of utilization, where maybe members of parliament might be accused, but you actually see that the government systems that were in place are actually the ones that actually curbed that implementation. For instance, the public procurement was actually a challenge, which has also been revised aimed at curbing this. But also for accountability, we've actually, the local authorities have to publish financial statements as well as budget lines. So before a budget is actually presented to the Ministry of Finance for a particular district, or maybe, yes, a particular district, all constituencies need to submit their budgets, which will be tabled by the local authorities. They also have a town hall meeting where they present the budget as well. That is one of the ways of ensuring accountability. And also with regards to monitoring, if citizens can actually play a critical role with regards to monitoring, they need to be informed with such information. That's why we're actually calling for timely reports on how that CDF is actually being utilized. And also, we can also call for physical inspection, in case maybe in the budget you actually say that you're going to construct a school, but that school is not actually being built. So local members can actually also put the representatives to task in order for them to be accountable, because they have also been given that mandate within the various pieces of legislation that is there. So hopefully going forward, I think when we just began the CDF, we actually increased the resources before putting in proper policy as well as legal framework, but those have actually been enhanced over the past few years. So we're hoping to see some improvements going forward with regards to that as well as accountability.
Earlier on you spoke about the new, looking at the new CDF bill. You made mention of it, and I know that one of the things that is being proposed in that CDF bill is actually a provincial committee in regards to the CDF. That means that in as much as we want to devolve, we want to concentrate power somewhere where it's not supposed to be. Do you think that that's the way we should go? Because right now already, implementation of CDF can be a challenge, just with 6. How many members we have again? 10 members. And that is proposing 17 members. That means that in as much as we are saying we are devolving, we still have some kind of power that is concentrated. And then also, we have the integrated district plan, for example, in my constituency. And every time that we are looking at this, our interest is to make sure that we are looking at how our integrated district plan is linking in, because that is also coming from our district. But like other honorable members say, do you find that more than 70% of CDF is already, done by the executive? For example, a palace in my constituency is not a priority, far from it. But I've been told you have to do HX palace. It's not a priority. It didn't come from the WDCs. So do you think that this is the way we should go with decentralization? Because in as much as we are decentralizing, we still want to concentrate power at the executive level.
That's a major challenge that is actually there. Like I've mentioned, to say that we've been trying to decentralize since independence. Until now, we've been failing to do so because of such challenges that are there. When you look at it in terms of the concept of decentralization, it's actually quite clear with regards to technical as well as fiscal decentralization. But I feel to say that maybe some of the actors are not well informed about their roles with regards to the decentralization process. I think that's why we need maybe even refresher courses so that people are made aware, and also sensitization, to look at it in terms of what is actually entailed. With regards to CDF, it actually has to bring development closer to the people. Decentralization has to bring development closer to the people, and the priority there are the people. So the needs have to come from the people and not from central government or other interfering actors as well. So what we actually want is that people should know that they actually have that power to actually question some of the issues that are where the CDF is actually utilized. If they do not call, for instance, the building of a palace, they can actually have to come on board and say, we did not call for this. The money for CDF is actually intended for local government development, and that's one of the ways in which government is going to do that. But if people are not made aware of their roles and well as how they can actually monitor, or maybe just how the power that they have with regards to the utilization of CDF, we're still going to be seeing other actors playing a key role with that, and as opposed to what is actually intended. So there's need for community sensitization. For PMRC, we also worked with regards to providing a simplified version of the decentralization policy, aimed at just bringing it at least more understandable for the citizens, so that they can also understand their roles. And hopefully when we have a lot of citizens questioning the utilization of the CDF, we can actually see some improvements, and where we can actually see that those actors that actually hinder the implementation are actually curbed as well. So what is needed is just for citizen participation, is citizen driven. So we need to ensure that the power is actually given to the citizens and that way they can actually question each and everything that is done with the CDF funds.
It's about the implementation of, for instance, CDF. We have seen Kenya, which has given this money to also the member of parliament, and they have been given even enough human resource to implement these resources in the constituencies, unlike given to the council, because council, they have their own functions. Do you think this could be the best way to do, so that member of parliament can be fully accountable for CDF, unlike the way it is? What is your reaction?
So maybe the issue that when we're looking at it in terms of decentralization, it's from government to government. So we do not to say members of parliament, there are some that might be within the ruling party and the others who might not be within the ruling party. And since there are different ideologies, each party actually has its own ideologies. That's why we have party manifestos. So we do not want a situation where each member of parliament actually pushes the ideologies within their political manifestos as well. So it has to come from a centralized, universal, as well as one that is actually uniform to all. So that as we are championing this development process, we do not actually put in place the needs or maybe the priorities of political ideologies, but we look at it in terms of the government-driven decentralization. So in my opinion, I would actually feel that it would be best, so from my opinion, the others might find it better that way, but looking at it in terms of Zambia, which has got a multi-party state, it will actually be best to actually have a uniform way of decentralizing, as opposed to leaving it all to members of parliament who have actually different ideologies based on the party affiliation.